I might jump into it too. I appreciate. Just give me 1 second. I'm trying to do one little thing here. All right. Because Collaborate is not working right, and I really need to do good screen share, and I'm even terrified to jump into the study session. This is a open Google Hangouts. I'm gonna keep the Collaborate window open until I see everybody in there, and then we'll just run from here. I am worried about this not being recorded. I think it will be recorded, so hopefully we'll be okay and be able to use it. But try to jump over here and see if that's working for everybody. And once you get into this session, see if you can drop out of the Collaborate session. Okay. All righty, we've got viewers. All right, I'm starting to see people here, but hi everyone. Starting to see people. There's a Q&A feature, and I'm not sure how to enable it so you can chat things. So I am trying to figure that out so we can do. Although it just says it's disabled. You may have to talk out questions tonight, so that means we may be talking to one another. Lisa's having issues. Apologies for this. I have no idea why it's being so stubborn tonight. You probably need to mute your microphone. So I can go in and mute everybody, it seems like. All right, so we can have chat, but we can't have Q&A. Got it. Okay, there we go. Ha ha ha! Figuring things out on the fly. Do you have to log in, Joan? It won't just let you view it. I thought I made it so where you could view it live without having to log in. I guess you do have to log in. No sound. Hopefully we can figure this out quickly.
I can't chat.
Okay, you can't chat. That's weird. As I have no idea what it looks like. There's the Q&A one, but then there's a chat above.
Yeah, mine says featured as disabled.
So weird. Ugh.
Christina, the chat is the sort of boxy looking talk bubble at the top above the Q&A.
Yeah, unfortunately, I thought it was going to. Let me try something. I'm trying to think. I think there might be a workaround for. My computer is not happy. Although it's fun, the audio is so much better over here. For those of you who haven't logged in yet, if you're having trouble getting into the Hangout, that should be a direct link to me streaming on YouTube. So try that. Yeah, and probably those who are watching me on YouTube, you may not be able to like chat things. For those of you who haven't logged in. Oh wow, there's a delay. That's weird. Sorry, everybody. Hopefully, we can get everybody over in looking at things in a minute. Uh, Okay, go Joan to YouTube. Hopefully that will work. Uh, James and Lise, what about y'all? I haven't heard anything from either of y'all.
I don't see any YouTube.
Okay. And I'm just waiting on Lise, and once we get that done, then I will probably get going on this here. Only 30 minutes late. Okay. This is for Lise. Lise, I'm going to go ahead and jump out of this and get started going through the material. If you can watch it directly on YouTube, you've got my number. I'll take questions for those who are watching on YouTube through my number, which will pop up on my screen too. So hopefully we can just go ahead and get moving. Okay. Alrighty. So give me a moment. It's going to look really wonky for like 2 seconds. And now we're good to go, everybody. Apologies for all the issues we are having today. Whoa, sorry. That probably looked kind of radical. Okay, and so hopefully you can see everything. So let's go ahead and kind of get moving along. So just as a reminder, this is where we were at last time. So we are talking about relational data modeling, identifying, the character. We talked about that last week. So we have identified those characteristics, the data elements. Oh, you just see me now? It's not showing? I must have gotten off the screen share. Sorry. Give me a second. It's this stupid, like, office presenter view. Give me 2 seconds. All right. There we go. All right, you should be able to see everything now. And we're off. Good to go. I think we have everybody. So from last time, what we talked about was, relational data modeling. We identified those characteristics. We talked about the relationship. This week, we're really going to start talking about database creation, the relationships between tables and databases. We're going to do some data importing, form design, talk about it a little bit, talk about SQL, or standard query language, wizards, forms that you see in database programs, and we'll kind of move on from there. So just as a reminder, kind of a quick review, and so I'm going to run through this a little bit fast. Basic terms, so table, which is our relation, a record, a row, or a tuple from last week towards the end of the class. Column, so it's a field attribute. We talked about the various data elements, and so we have our data types, our links for those elements, as well as the types of relationships. So primary keys, foreign keys, one-to-many relationships, many-to-many relationships, and the process of normalizing, making all that data as efficient, unrepeated, things like that. So when we talk about what is repeating, what we're really dealing with is, the primary key may repeat, but what's going to be practical, and how are we going to handle these various exceptions to our issues? And so when we start talking about data, specifically sort of unique data, we want the primary keys to be unique to identify specific rows. So you want to be able to relate from, this row needs to relate to this other pieces here. So we're using this example of, we can use an example of like a music item here. So we have, our primary key is an integer. It's a non-null repeating, so that means it always has to be there. It's going to be a unique value, and we can use this particular integer to identify whatever this row of information is. So if it's, Adele's new song, and we've got Adele's new CD that's coming out, we'll have a primary key that will relate us to that particular item. This is also going into where we can look at things from a little bit more of a complex way too. So for example here's the SAA glossary, which is built on a relational database. And so pieces of this sort of data subscribes to certain columns in the database, as well as certain tables in the database as well. So a reference and notes may be in one database, or connected to it in certain ways and things like that. And here you can see more examples going in further on of what's going on. So we see the previous item, and then on the back end, this is actually what the data itself is looking like. So as you can see, we're starting to deal with all this sort of complex information that's going to be represented in different ways. I talked about that last week when we talked about things like XML, how we are doing markup to help us understand it, but it really gets represented in a little bit different way. So hopefully we can see the screen sharing. I see Lisa's having a little bit of trouble. Hopefully our viewers on YouTube are getting things good pretty well as well. And I'm going to do a quick email check just to be on the safe side. I don't know why you're getting a white screen on this case. Again, we'll hopefully be back and collaborate next week. I don't know what was wrong with it this week. But moving right along here. So on the back end even further, so we see the original piece of data here, or kind of how it's represented online, the tables that you see in the back end, so the actual definitions, the citations for the definitions, and the sources for the definition are all in 3 separate tables. Then you actually see how they're relating in the actual database. So for instance, our citations, we could have a one-to-many relationship here, which is what's defined by this, and this is actually a screen capture from Access, as well as other relationships between different definitions, and the sources are actually relating into the citations themselves. So this is actually that structure of how the SAA database looks on the back end. So let me do a demo, and hopefully this will pull things up, and you can actually see the process of creating tables and creating databases in phpMyAdmin. And so let me load up the virtual box, and hopefully it will pull in. Now you can actually do database creation and work from the command line, and many of the things I'll show you are pretty much the same way it was being. Well, I'll actually show you the command line features a little bit later, but show you just sort of graphically how it looks too. phpMyAdmin is a pretty good way of going about doing this because it's got a little bit of a graphic interface to it. It works pretty well to be able to kind of do some of these things. I will say though that, and I know Jones over there on, yeah, you can use the same one for this. Those of you who are on like a smaller machine, sometimes when you get too many things running, PHP admin, especially on my Mac machine, is a little bit sluggish at times. So honestly, the easy way you could go in here and create a database is for PHP my admin, you just type in a database name. So we could say test, and you click create. You give it collation, which basically is a type of, the type of text it's going to use. So usually I go with Unicode, UTF or something like that, and that's all you have to do. The same way with if we're in a database, creating a table, all you have to do is title it table, give it and say 3 columns, and click go. And then you can go in and start identifying the particular pieces of information. So let's say the first one is, our primary key. We can label it as such. Normally that'd be an integer. We could give it a length. We can give it a default value. Usually with the primary key, I say the default is null. Give it, all kinds of different attributes as well. In another screen, you actually can set the primary key, and so I'll show you what that looks like here, test 1, just so you have an understanding. And so we can actually come in and look at our structure. So I click on the structure key piece, and this is where we can start assigning things like primary key, primary values, and things as well. So I can click, do you really want to execute this? Yes, I do. And you can do all this graphically. A lot of this can be done from a SQL side too, which we'll go into a little bit later. But really, that's all you have to do to kind of create a database in PHP-MyAdmin. Many of you did this if y'all played with WordPress. You just create a blank database, and then WordPress goes in and does all the extra work as well. So kind of what does this sort of mean for us? So when we're starting to deal with these things, yes, we can do it graphically, and there's a lot of tools out there. PHP-MyAdmin is a tool, but a lot of what we really are what you really kind of want to understand is the structured query language, and that's partly because when you're working with a lot of different archival stuff, specifically databases, you'll need to kind of know how to execute at least rudimentary commands or understand them from a standpoint of looking at looking at the database itself, or looking at programs that use databases to understand what's going on, how is it altering the databases, things like that. So it does use English-like statements, so this is a little bit easier from a word standpoint compared to like our programming examples too. So in some respects, the wording is a little bit easier. For instance, terms like create means create something. Terms like drop means delete or get rid of something. Select means the same thing as you're going to a store and selecting something. You're selecting it and taking it off the shelf. You can also do some complex things where you're doing like where statements, looking for specific criteria and things like that. So one sort of thing to keep in mind, one of the big conventions is your command structures are usually delivered in uppercase words, and we'll see some of this in a minute. But the thing to keep in mind is database names, especially in Linux, are always case sensitive. So these are always issues to keep in mind. So if you name it like uppercase, one letter, and then the rest lowercase, keep in mind this as you're entering your commands. The data values themselves, they're not case sensitive unless you specify. And as you're entering in your commands, you want to make sure you have some consistency. So if you write all your commands in lowercase, always write your commands in lowercase. You don't have to, but just keep in mind. It's honestly good for troubleshooting, and I find that if I write it in sort of proper form, I can go in and look at what's going on. I did a couple of experiments earlier today to see if I could get some of these things to work, and it was just easier to write things out when I screwed up. I could actually go in and see it when I screwed up. So big things to keep in mind, for management, you want to create, and this is also for tables. You also want to do altering and dropping, so that's just for a management. For manipulation, it's use, then this tells the MySQL to use a specific database, and usually you only have to tell it to use once. Insert, select, update rows and columns, delete, truncate, get rid of things in the table, or stop calling things like that. So, for instance, in just sort of like our command, when we're writing programs, we have a syntax we follow, and so that syntax is LibreOffice is currently in development. The thing about OpenOffice, the group of guys who are working on that, because they used to be connected to Oracle, Oracle stopped supporting the project, and they all went to LibreOffice. I would recommend moving to LibreOffice because it's still doing releases, whereas OpenOffice kind of stopped doing releases, I think. Or I think maybe somebody picked it up a couple years ago. There was a whole kerfuffle over OpenOffice a while ago. So I would keep that in mind, and I think LibreOffice is a little bit more updated. So for instance, our basic syntax is verb, the object, and our condition. And so we've seen this a few times where the verb is what we want to do, where we're trying to select specific things like a table, a column, or a row, and we have certain conditions. So an example might be select a title from our readings, and so this is the same kind of data you are working with for your assignment this week, where the publication year is 2012, order by title. So I can come over here and demonstrate that. So I've pulled all that data into a database. You can see we've got the readings one here. When you're in PHP-MyAdmin, if you click on a database, it knows to automatically use that database. And so we'll come into our SQL information here. And so, we're going to select our title. Select. And this is the great thing about doing your commands in PHP-MyAdmin. I know the assignment has you run through LibreOffice, and you can kind of go back and forth between these two. It shows you what's a verb and kind of differentiates. And so we're going to select from title, and so we're letting us know, actually we need to select, we'll actually select title. And one little weirdness about PHP-MyAdmin, it likes for you to tell it. The syntax is not going to work right. I'm missing something. Actually, I'm going to come in here and fix something a little bit. So this is an interesting feature I just did. I kind of clicked on the one table I wanted to use, and it already kind of sets up some of the SQL for you. That's the good thing about using tools, and we'll kind of talk about tools a little bit later, is it sort of fixes some of the problems for you. Like, for instance, I was having trouble forming that piece about readings. Interesting thing when you're doing the actual SQL entry is you can split it up by lines. It doesn't matter. You end things with a semicolon to let the program know you're done working with it. So from readings, where here it's equal to 2012. I know, exciting broadcasting. And then you end things with a semicolon. And then when you're in this, you click Go. And then basically what it does is presents you with everything, and so we just did a quick query. Every title of every book in the readings, or every readings in the reading database that has the publication year of 2012. And so that's what just happened in this particular query. And so, as I said, when possible, use some sort of tool to do it for you. I showed you how to do this in PHP MyAdmin, but you can also do queries and create queries and forms and use wizards to help you do queries in things like LibreOffice, or as well as Access. So in LibreOffice, it uses the term select only. Access, LibreOffice really only lets you view the data, not really do a lot to the data. Access will let you select, append, update, and delete data as well. And the other thing too great about using these particular tools is you can start trying to do the queries, connect databases, things like that, and you can then copy the SQL code. And so here you have an example of the SQL code generated by LibreOffice, in particular the Libre base right here. And so the funny thing about tools is they often produce really complex looking code that may or may not work, and so you'll end up having to troubleshoot it if you directly put it into it. So for instance, you're selecting the title and the readings from the catalog.readings as readings, whereas really we just want to select title, whether or not we've read it, from the readings database with some other conditions at play here. And if you try to put this into either the command line, or as I did in PHP MyAdmin, it's just going to come back and give you an error, and you'll be sitting there trying to piece it out. And this is the good thing too about when you get errors, and hopefully I'll generate an error a little bit later tonight, is that you can actually see where the error is. It'll tell you the spot where the first error is, and you can kind of work backwards until you get your code right. And that's the good thing about working in PHP MyAdmin and something else too. And so when we're kind of working with our stuff, the big thing that we're trying to figure out is you've got to specify a table, a column, a row, and a field sometimes, and there's a way to kind of go about that. So oftentimes our objects are, we can either fully qualify them or unqualified them. So for instance, if I wasn't in the readings table, so if I was just in the general database, like I'm using the CSV one, I'd have to qualify it and say select readings .title. So I'm saying select from the readings table the column title from the readings table. So you're just giving it all this information. If you already know that it's, if you already sort of have told it use this table, you have to select title from readings, and you can kind of go this way. These are two approaches. So going back over to our example, I'll come back into our database. We'll do another SQL. So if I'm not telling it which particular table to use, we'll say title from readings. And so this, I knew that was going to give me a problem. His title. And yeah. And so it's interesting. Again, each one of these usually does some sort of weird kind of approach to the way it does what it's doing. Like for instance, if I do it right in that way, again, you're always going to be there are always going to be kind of some issues at play here, and I kind of knew there'd be some errors. I want to see if I can actually get one of these to work. And honestly, if I was doing this from command line, it would probably actually work better. But type Yeah, it's going to give me an error. But as you can see, it says it's getting that wrong piece right there. Okay, well, I'm going to fail this one out. Again, usually this works better from a more command line kind of interface. The PHP myadmin seems to be being a little bit wonky. And I should assume with a night of errors, we would just keep having more and more errors all night long. I'm going to kind of keep moving through things, so if you need to take a break, just take a break. I do believe this is being recorded via YouTube, and I'm going to try to distribute that later. If not, I'll just do some demos tomorrow or in the next couple of days and get them to everybody. But so, you know, when we're kind of moving beyond the sort of qualified, fully qualified or unqualified, a lot of the things you'll be working with, you'll be doing some unqualified things. You may have to do some qualified selection, and really this is when you start getting to things a little bit more advanced, when you're starting to do real qualified selection. And I know this part of the semester is probably the most complex piece that we're going to deal with. But what things we can do is, you know, we can select by column and name. And so, you know, what's interesting here is that we can use these different types of selections to pull different pieces of information. So if you only wanted the title or the publication in the publication year, we can do that and select and even order by specific things. We'll talk about that a little bit. But you can also just pull all the data from a table. So, you know, we'll go back in here. I'll click on the readings table so it knows knows to use that one. And you know, here we have the command already here. And I'm just going to say select all from readings. And what that does is just pull everything in the table. And so it's just a, you know, asterisk is always usually a wild card of some kind. And so we can use other types of qualifiers or conditionals to kind of help us find things. So for instance, we can use the where field. So is something equal to, greater than, less than, or etc. Does it match a pattern like something? Is it null or not null? So is there a value there? Is there not a value there? So for instance, we can use this select title pub year from readings where title is like a percent sign, and basically what this is saying is what we want to is we're looking for things that start with the letter A. When you see a percent, that usually means something before that sort of condition or after that condition. We want it to follow this sort of pattern, and this is sort of a pattern statement. So sometimes we could actually have it look for every word, and this is a more complex statement. I'm not going to show you this one tonight, that has E as the third letter. And so we can set up a statement where we're looking for E as the third letter or things like that. And then we also have, you know, we can look for a publication year. So again, to pull in this example, so we'll select title, comma, pub year from readings, and then we'll do our where statement. I usually, when we start doing where statements, it's usually good for typing purposes to put it on a second line, because it just helps forming it a lot better. Where title like a and here. And the reason I use these notation marks on the outside is we're actually, you're looking for a specific value, and it needs to know it's looking within those cells for a specific value. Of course. Where clause. And this is the same error I had earlier this afternoon. Yay, exciting stuff to actually try.
Josh, you have pup year on that bottom line. Should it be pub?
It should be pub. It's always something stupid. Yeah, there we go. That's the problem. And as you can see, we're selecting everything that was done in 2012. It's always a pub year. And I'm surprised mine is not. Give me a second, I'm getting a text in. We're still having errors from other people. Word. And yeah, and if this recording doesn't take tonight, I will just record the entire lecture with demos again tomorrow and post it so we have it. Oops, I didn't want to do that. But as you can see, you can do some conditional kind of statements. And you can also do ordering when you're in your database as well. So let's get back to internet. Click into it. And really what this is, and really what we're showing you with these different queries is you can deal with data in a variety of different ways. Default is usually ascending, so data will usually ascend. But if I wanted to, we could actually go in here and pull some different pieces, pull some different columns, and only look at stuff from 2004 and order by the descending title as well. Another thing that I think is really interesting too is to go in here and do an SQL, and we'll come into this database. And we'll select from readings, and then we'll do an SQL from here, and so it'll be partly formed for us. And then we can do just order by descend. And so we'll pull everything. Oh, limit 0. Order. I'll just do pub, not pup year. And so here we get pulled in one, and so typically it orders it ascending, and now we're doing descending. So you just get to see a different way of presenting the information. And of course we could still do the same way by doing some different views in a program like Access as well. And this is a piece that I was having some hard time getting to work tonight. But joins are the process where you're connecting multiple tables in a database together. And honestly, this part is a lot easier to do in a database program like LibreOffice or Access. I wanted to try to do it through PHP admin, so I spent all afternoon doing that, and I couldn't get it to work. So I'm not able to completely walk through this. But this is where you're doing that relational part, where you're Christy is asking, how often do you do this as an archivist? I can't say this comes up a super lot, but if you've got like an archivist toolkit instance, you may have to work with these sort of things. The issue with this is kind of knowing how these things work if tools break that are database based, but more importantly, if you don't use something like Toolkit or Archive Space, you may actually have to build a database to store metadata. And so this is really the important piece here is, for instance, maybe you want to set up a premise database for some of your preservation metadata, and you just link out to the database info instead of building it out directly into one of your systems. Yeah, he built the whole database for the version 1. I think they're on 2 versions right now. But yeah, it's so usually you're not going to do it all the time, but it really depends on what you're doing. And more you're going to have to think about databases as part of kind of what you're doing as an archivist. So joins can be particularly complicated. And particularly it's, you've got left, right, inner, outer joins. Your joining statements connect via the keys. And so it's referencing the primary keys and the foreign keys. But it's really just good to know that these things work and how it's kind of the processes which they're coming into. So here you can see some join statements as they're generated by LibreOffice versus Access. So Access seems to have a little bit of a cleaner value. So you're selecting the authors, readings, titles, attribute values, things like that too. And of course, and this is where it gets more complicated, and I wish I could have shown you a little bit more directly, but I've been working on the demo stuff for a couple of days now, and it hasn't played out exactly like I want to. But basically, the idea is, okay, we want to see who's the author of our different works, and then we do some organization by author types. And so, here's an example of how it was generated in the author. So, like, for instance, this would come into play where you're wanting to see specific citations by a specific author. And you can see some repeats that have to come up here. You have to see, it just gets really complicated. And granted, you may not have to do this a lot. And we do have an elective that's a full class on database design, which is it's a fun class, and I say that as well. But and again, I'm not spending a lot of time on this. You probably won't have to deal with this a super lot. It's really kind of complicated. For the most part, the big things we might try to do is do some inserting from command line, doing some data entry, especially if you create a database for things like preservation metadata and other things like that. So you can, I can insert into readings, and basically what you do is you'll type out you want to insert into readings, and you give the column names in a specific order, demo title, demo publication, things like that. So let's go try to do one of these. So we'll take away our select, and we'll do insert. Readings. Of course, again, just for good forming, it's always good to put different pieces on separate lines, and one reason is for error messages. And so we'll do title, comma, and title. We'll do and then we give it our values. And if you notice here, how it's being entered is very similar to like printing things out as a comma delineated file. And so that's kind of where some of these same things are kind of going on. So I'm just going to say test, and then what's the term we used here? Demo pub. And pub info, demo. There, and then 1966, because everything's going wrong today. And then we end, do it. Yeah. I knew I messed up the syntax somewhere. I'm like, it can't be this easy. And boom, As you can see, all that info got placed in. Interesting enough, we can come back here and do a select from that where title equals. I called the title the publication demo, didn't I? I think so. Okay, maybe I didn't. Well, nonetheless, you could go in and actually see where we added the attributes in. And actually, an easier way to do it is just come in here and browse. I called it test, that's why. And you can see here's where we added our materials in, right there. Easier way to do that is in most. I think having an understanding of how they work and how things connect together is really important because you can, if something happens, you can be able to piece together what happened pretty easily. Another thing too is you can come over here, and most projects or programs have an insert, and you can go in and just add all the values this way through a form. And this is usually much better. So usually when you're creating a database, you're going to want to create some kind of form. In this case, you know, just showing you some more examples of what you're doing. Forms are really useful for kind of just representing this data easier. I think we talk about that a little bit later. There's some other types. So you want to update it. So you pick a particular column. So say you put in a lot of things and you put in the wrong date for a bunch of different files, or you're working with some images and you put in a wrong subject and it's all the same batch of images. So you can come in and look for a condition. Say you have part of your database was to, when you put in your entry, you put in a date timestamp. And so if you have a date stamp, you can come in and change everything for like this year or this date or something like that. And so, and sorry I didn't change the date here, but this would be the 13th or the 11th is when your next task is due. And it's another sort of form worksheet like we've previously done. So you create a database from a data model, and so you'll kind of work out the model. You're actually using the readings databases, the author databasing, the attributes database that I sort of showed a little bit of tonight. You'll import it from the data from a text file, and you'll create some basic statements to go through it. I think you do a little bit of joining, but it's not really super complex stuff to do. I kind of ran through this really fast tonight considering all of our technical issues. Any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. I'm going to make sure recording is done, even if I have to do a whole nother one tomorrow that might be like 30 minutes of me just running through the material again so you've got something to review from, because this kind of stuff will be on the final, so it's going to be something you'll probably see again. I think because I broadcasted it to YouTube, there should be a version that's kept. I feel a little bad for going through it so fast, especially after having a long issues. But hopefully you'll have something to review from. So apologies for all the problems. Hopefully Collaborate will be nicer to us next week. And I'll hang around a little bit if anybody wants to ask me some questions. All right, with that, that's about all I've got for tonight. And apologies we had such a horrible technical issues, especially on this night of all nights. And so with that, I guess we will. Yeah, I will post the YouTube link somewhere once I know it's there. If not, I'll send you like a Cultura link or post like an MP4 on archival studies website that we have. So you'll have something. I don't know what that something will be, and I hopefully will have it tomorrow. Oh, and yeah, happy Thanksgiving. No class next week, everybody. I'll see everybody the week after Thanksgiving because we have a couple more classes, one more lecture, and then the final.